The new piece of information, Ian, is the Apple claims, it seems to be here, and the fact that this is perhaps stifling competition.
Yeah, that's the bombshell for today. I mean, we've had very general accusations against them, you know, obscure kind of legalistic accusations, but this is like specifically saying, no, Qualcomm, you used your position to basically force Apple to take your chips, and that hurt competition.
I mean, we are seeing a share market, a share price reaction, Corey, but this is an ongoing theme, it seems. I mean, South Korea just last month seemed to be fining to the tune of less than $1 billion. But what sort of money do you think is at stake here?
Well, it gets to the heart of the business model for Qualcomm. Fundamentally, the business model for Qualcomm is invent chips that they think are great and then license those chips out for other people to make those chips and install those chips and gain influence by having a standard, often standards written specifically for Qualcomm chips. So this really does get to the heart of their model is the relationships that they have with the companies that make the phones, and there is no one bigger single phone maker than Apple.
Ian, it is a special model that Qualcomm has actually developed here, and
Right.
how much do you think they can fight this in the courts? What's their record like?
Their record is almost flawless. They never lose, which it sounds, I mean, when you look at all of the headlines, you look at all of the trouble they've had over the years, they only ever really lost one case against Broadcom back about 5 or 6 years ago. Everything else gets overturned on appeal. After years later, they do a deal, and they're very successful. But just to pick up on what Corey said, though, what they license is actually the fundamentals that go into mobile phone technology. What happens with the chips and the chip designs, that's another business. What today has established, or tried to establish for the first time, is a link between those two things. And that is the biggest threat to their business so far.
So if we're thinking of losers and winners here, the fact that maybe they do end up being thought as guilty, rather it might seem to occur, who does eventually this win out for? Does smartphones get cheaper for you and I?
And they would absolutely get cheaper if vendors, if phone makers could shop around for baseband chips. I mean, the baseband chip is one of the most expensive components in a phone. If they could shop around for that, they might end up with lower pricing here. And that's what the fundamental of this gets down to: is were those vendors, and was an Apple, was a Samsung able to go out and find the cheapest chips and the best chips they could get for connecting their phones to the networks, or were they compelled to go to Qualcomm because of other power that Qualcomm has in the marketplace?
I think what's fascinating here is who's doing the talking. Is Apple, are executives there coming to the FTC and saying we feel that we've been hardly done by?
Well, for anybody who's interested, if you read around page 25 of the filing, there's a lot of specifics about agreements between the two companies, deals that were signed, renegotiated, re-signed. Hard to imagine that came to the FTC in a dream and that they didn't get that information from somewhere.
It wasn't likely that Qualcomm was sending them that information. And Apple's got everything to gain here, right? Apple would certainly like to be able to play the providers against each other. They've been unable to do that, according to what was in this complaint.
And so the providers that could be winning out of the back of this, do we see any share reaction?
Intel, as we actually broke news on last year, has actually managed to get some of the orders, take some of those orders away from Qualcomm for the first time pretty much in the history
of
the
Apple phones.
In the Apple phones, right. So a clear beneficiary there, but a lot of other companies have tried to, go against Qualcomm over the years and really have just faded away.
So I mean, brilliant scoop today from your work in, but give us a time frame here. Is this something we're going to be talking about over the course of weeks, over months, over years?
This is a years thing. I mean, you have to think, even if it's, because first of all, it's a court case. It's not just going to a judge and saying, give me a judgment. This is actually going to go to court. So you've got all of that, what that entails, and Qualcomm cannot afford to let this go. They're going to have to appeal this as far as they possibly can if it goes against them.
Corey, are you slightly surprised that we didn't see more than $4 billion wiped off? I mean, how much of a threat do we actually think this is?
Well, the other aspect here is Friday, right? We have a new administration coming in, a president being sworn in on Friday, and this is still a democratically controlled FTC. Yeah. That will change on Friday, and so the result of that will be initially an FTC with just 2 members, which would be very strange. It's supposed to have, by statute, 5 members, and the party that controls the White House is able to control that organization with 3 members there. But so that itself might change. I think it's one of the reasons you saw this happen today, because these commissioners wanted to get this deal out. And you saw a very strenuous response from the Republican board, dissenting vote. And she actually published, very unusually, published her complaints about this, maybe setting some groundwork for how the FTC would look at this thing as early as next week.